guys, and welcome back to Dawn of War 2. We will not be going into Dawn of War 3. I will take the advice of my prestigious audience that was like, Dawn of War 3 was a big miss. I had a quick look at it. Yeah, very glossy, very MOBA-ish. I'm fine with skipping over it, but Dawn of War 4 looks like it's going to be great. I had a little look at the trailer of that. It was fantastic. But this is about Dawn of War 2, in particular, the end of the Chaos campaign. The Chaos campaign. It turned out I had one mission to go. And as it was a story mission, wasn't particularly difficult. A lot of the optional stuff is far more difficult. It turned into a giant war against the ghastly beasts of Nurgle. It's interesting how they tried to make the end game difficult here, the very end game, which is just do massive, monstrous AoE attacks that, unless you've got sprint or leap or teleport, you just can't get out of. So suddenly, and certainly if you take your eye off the ball for a millisecond, like, your team is dead. But they also put a respawn relay next to the fight. So you just run them back, get your reinforcements, and just come back again. I mean, in some ways, let's talk about this. It's very 40k. It's like you just throw human flesh and bone at it until eventually you win. Like that's kind of what you're doing towards the end of here. Is just you're just hurling flesh and blood at the enemy until you eventually overcome it just through sheer will of souls and lives, clattering into it and just smashing into the fight. But that was the end of Dawn of War 2 Chaos. I still stand this was S tier. I very rarely give something an S tier. I wouldn't give the base game an S tier. I'd say it's a decent A. You know, it's solid, right? Maybe a high B, A. The Chaos campaign is S tier. Everything is just radically improved in all kinds of ways. It's way more fun. The only minor fault I could find with it was the gearing. Is if you didn't want to go down the corruption path, which the game obviously wants you to do for replayability as well, is that you kind of just at the mercy of RNG of what drops. But that does ease off at the very, very, very late game. Like just before the end mission, you'll start getting some rewards that you can actually just turn in on a character and it'll give them an up-to-date weapon. So they were very aware that this situation could occur, which I think is good. Like that clearly shows playtesting. There were more than a few people who obviously encountered this problem of, if I don't want to use corruption weapons, then I really just don't have much in the way of choice. The same with armor. Like, I think a couple of my units were wearing level 20 armor, and they're level 30, and you just couldn't get anything better. So what they decided to do is occasionally you will get these little reward, like scrolls, and where you usually donate gear for bonus XP, which is obviously worthless once you're level capped, it'll give you a choice. And it will actually tell you what they're going to get as well. It's like, if you give this to Avitus, he's going to get a big-ass heavy bolter, which is what I did, I think. Ending my units being rock solid. But loved this, loved the units, had a great time with it. And as it came to an end, which is mainly the focus of this video, people were like, well, now you have to do Retribution, which was the third expansion that they created for Dawn of War 2. And in this one, people are very excited about me getting it. It's like, you could play as the Orks. In fact, you could play as anybody you want. You could play as the Tyranids, you could play as Chaos, you could play as the Eldar, you could even be a lone guardsman, and you could play the campaign in any single one of these factions. I was like, that's unusual then. So is there 6 or 7 different faction stories? No, it's the same story, but you could play as any one of the races. I was like, huh, interesting. Okay, TLDR, before we get into this, I did not like this at all, in any way at all. I don't think I got past the 3rd or maybe 4th mission. I gave it a good college try, but I was like, I do not like this game. In fact, I am really bored, which was a shock. Coming off S-tier campaign of, you can imagine how excited I was. I just played a phenomenal game. Into this and being 4 missions in, I knew I was kind of done like 2 missions in. I was like, this is just not it. So let's go into a bit of detail about what this is. Retribution is an entirely separate game. Even though I have the Dawn of War 2 Anniversary Edition, Retribution I had as part of the bundle that I'd bought a long time ago of Warhammer games. But it installs as a separate game. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then the reasons for that started to become apparent. This is when they really invested heavily into the multiplayer aspect of the game. They wanted you to be doing multiplayer stuff. So that it then explains why the campaign can be played in any number of races. Because the campaign is now merely a nice tutorial as to how each of these races play for multiplayer. Right, this is a very common thing we see in RTS that is multiplayer focused, is you can do the campaign with any number of races because they're going to gradually teach you what the units do, how you can play them, what their different names is, what their equivalents are on the other side, what their strengths and weaknesses are, all that kind of stuff. So that became very apparent to me very quickly. I chose the Orks because I love the Orks. They're so fun. They're so goofy. And in fact, they're so goofy that when I dive a little bit into the lore, so I'm watching like one of the videos like Lewiton's videos or something like that, the Ork stories are my favorite because they're just so stupid and ridiculous. And in the grimdark universe of 40k, having that sort of levity of the Storm Boys and the Brain Boys and all this kind of stuff is really fun. So I played as the Orks, which were very piratey. Got my big monster unit, which I wanted to turn into a big melee clobber hammer. The very first thing I noticed in the very first mission was that they heavily put body blocking into the game, which is a tactical thing for multiplayer. Very frustrating in the PvE scenario. There was buttons and combinations that I've now been very well trained to press because of Dawn of War 2's base campaign and the Chaos campaign that just no longer worked. And that very quickly stood out to me. I was like, why is this not working? Like just moving a unit to a certain area and then I check back and they just haven't moved. And I was like, what's going on here? And it was because of terrain, and maybe I'd had another unit positioned in cover, but because the way they spread when you put them in cover, they don't always go in like a nice, neat line. They'll move around a little bit. Is that unit couldn't find a path and just wouldn't move. Now, the way this is indicated is shown to you on the UI in terms of your reticle will have a circle with a red cross in it. But because of modern day UI scaling, my mouse was practically impossible to see. And you'll see the difference in the UI. The way I fixed it in the campaign in the base game was a little mod that I found on Nexus Mods that managed to fix the UI scaling for modern day displays, because I play in 4K, and that fixed it. But because Retribution doesn't add itself to the base Dawn of War game, it's a totally independent game, that no longer worked for Retribution. So I was like, oh, okay, so we've got this scaled up UI, which is a bit frustrating. And I basically could not see the mouse in terms of when combat was happening. It was very hard to know where my mouse was. Regularly, you'll just see me sort of wiggling around if it gets lost in the noise of the combat that's happening. So that was going on. But yeah, I very quickly noticed that certain functions that I was trying to enable on my characters just weren't happening. And this happened more and more as you got more and more units. As certainly once you got your 4 hero units, they would constantly get blocked. The most frustrating part of this was actually the, I think they're the Storm Boys that jetpack into the arena. They just would not function at all in any way. And it became apparent what I used to be able to do, which was very nice, is, oh, this fight's going on here, so I want my units to move to the minimum range and then leap into this combat because, you know, a wave of enemies has spawned in the distance. That wouldn't happen. Certain terrain elements were larger than their graphic, so if you were trying to land in this area, it just would not allow it to happen, and they would just stand still. And regularly what I saw was my units just AFKing. That was really irritating. There would be a fight going on 5 yards away from them, and if you don't micro tell them to attack them, they just stood still. And we like zoomed in on them, and it's like, this guy, they're just not doing anything. They just stood still. And it's like, yeah, well, in multiplayer, you're supposed to micro them all. I was like, oh, okay, but I get that, and they started adapting to that, because it's not like I haven't done that in other RTSs before. But generally speaking, if enemies are close, your guys will attack them. And there was no stance or command or anything I could get to make that happen. So that became obviously a big source of frustration, but adaptable. That's why I said, right, we'll give it a few more missions so I can get used to the new way of doing things. It's a stark difference than what we had in the other game, but let's keep playing so I'll just get used to it, right? It's not like it was off-putting, but I can adapt to it. Carried on playing, and then they introduced the more RTS elements of it, which is that you can constantly recruit more boys, in this case, or just more troops, which then go underneath your hero units. So keybinds-wise, you have 1 to 4 for your hero units, but then you might recruit some gunners, or some extra Storm Boys, or some weird boys, and they would just add themselves to it. So you end up with a full sort of like StarCraft Command and Conquer style keybind system of 1 through 9 or whatever, and you get a population limit. So this was a new system they added. I didn't mind that. It was, you know, it's a bit more awkward to get them going. What did bother me about the system, though, and will come down to strategically where you want to, and obviously in the early missions I didn't have this, is strategically what units you want, and then making sure you build them in that kind of order to make it work. Otherwise, what you ended up with very quickly, and certainly because some of them die off, is the remaining keys that you're pressing were kind of randomized a little bit. That just annoyed me. Like, I played a lot of RTS, certainly back in the day, and it's like, okay, if I've gone to Command & Conquer, my Grenadiers will be on 6, right? That's where I bind the Grenadiers, or my units of Grenadiers. They'll be around here, and I like that logic and muscle memory of where they go, and that messing up, and certainly not finding a good way of reinforcing them is sometimes you would have like a Stormboy, but like 2 of them have died, so you've got 1 guy, but then on like 8, you've got like 4 that you want to get in, and they do more damage. So you're microing like 1 unit, but your population's also... It was just a little bit messy. Ultimately, it's a different game. That's the reality of it. This is much more like old school RTS, rather than the big hero. It was definitely trying to mix Dawn of War 1 and 2 together, and I just didn't like that marriage. I didn't think it made sense. I didn't think it fit for how I wanted to play. I just got frustrated and more frustrated with the way it was presented, and I know if I poured hours and hours into it, it would be fine. I'm not oblivious to that, but ultimately, I wasn't having fun, and that was the nature of the beast. The missions had fallen back more to teaching you how to use these units. Like, this is a stealthy kind of mission. This is this kind of mission. Because they want to show off how their units work and stuff. So, sorry to say, Dawn of War 2 Retribution, not for me. Not for me. I was a little sad about it. I was so excited about coming off Chaos, and then when all the changes started to become more apparent, I was like, I'm not a fan of this. I did become aware, because you have a resource system now where you're picking up... Oh, God, you have to shoot every crate. I forgot about that until I'm talking about it now. So they changed the resource system. Previously, what you would do is, if you needed grenades or health packs or something like that, in Dawn of War 1, shooting a crate will just refill any consumables you've used, just globally, no problem. In Dawn of War 2, they didn't like that, so you shot the crates, and one of 3 or 4 random items would drop out of that, and you would either get the one you wanted or you didn't, and you just moved on with your life. It was whatever. And then a lot of times you didn't need anything, so you could just ignore the supply crates that were down. So they weren't a hassle. They were there. You either were in a situation where you didn't need them, or you wanted to look for them, which is great. It's like, I hope I find some crates, and then I want to shoot them because I want to get what I want. In this one, in Retribution, you have to break every single crate regardless, because you're going to pick up resources, one of 3 different resources. I think it's like power and something else, some currency, which you then use to either buy more units or upgrade your hero units. So I was like, oh, the way these supply units work is a little annoying for me. So what I'm going to do is, in fact, invest into my hero units. So I'm not bothering with these scraggly guys that are just hanging out and doing stuff, and I want more powerful main hero units. And the upgrades are kind of boring. It's like more health, more damage, whatever. But that'll do. But destroying every single crate you see just slowed down the game for me. Right? Because it's kind of like playing Path of Exile, and you have to open every chest. It's just frustrating. I don't want to do that. I want to get on and start blasting things and throwing grenades at them and things like that. That's what I want to do. That's the fun stuff. What I don't want to do is break every single crate. And because the resources are kind of important, there's lots of them as well. It seemed to me like there was far more crates that just needed blowing up. It's not a difficult thing to do. You just like 1, click that one, 2, click that one, click that. But it's slowing the whole thing down to a crawl in certain areas. And then good players are like, well, just don't do it and just win the mission. I'm like, right, but it's the early game. You're going to be doing this kind of stuff because you want to play around with the systems and you want upgraded units and stuff like that. That's supposed to be fun. But I did not find it fun. So I put that to bed. Yeah, a bunch of things I didn't enjoy about that game. I could see why it's there. It's built for multiplayer, where you're going to be doing these things and capturing those resources and getting your stronger units is going to be a vital element of multiplayer. It's just not what I wanted out of the game, unfortunately. Now, we had a choice, and I do want to talk about this briefly, because I don't think we're coming back to it. Maybe, maybe not. Is two big ones in the Warhammer universe people were asking me to play were Darktide and Daemonhunters. Darktide, people very excited for, but realized as I have them, is a Left 4 Dead variation, you know, the Horde mode variation, which is best played multiplayer. You can play single player, but it's designed for multiplayer, right? Yeah, we know what it's supposed to be. So I've put that to the side for now until we get a day where we can mess around with it with people who are into it and have a great stream with it rather than being this sort of off-the-cuff, let's go kind of thing. So what I tried was Daemonhunters. This is XCOM, Warhammer style, with fully customizable units, names, decor, basically like making little Warhammer models out of your guys to play XCOM with. This was really fun, so dramatic, so cinematic. Really just over the top. And this is the reason I might go back to it. Not particularly the gameplay. The gameplay is fine. It's got a very somewhat obnoxious UI over the top of it. It's all very like fills your screen with grandiose stuff, but the cinematics of you fighting these demons and stuff is very, very fun. So I'll gauge the audience on that, or whether we want to go back to it or not. So we got a feel for it, played it for a couple of hours. It was definitely silly is what I would say. It was very silly, very over the top. I will say one thing I noticed is the ratio of gameplay to ship management and conversations was a little lopsided towards ship management and conversations. Like, some very long conversations have to take place on the ship, but that might be early game lore fleshing out, character introductions, that kind of thing, and then it eases off later. I was like, I think I've done for 2 hours, I did 3 missions, and each of them was about 10 minutes long. It was a little Final Fantasy 14. Let's put it that way. There's a little FF14. It's like you do a mission for like 7-8 minutes, and then it's like back to the ship. Got to meet with all these characters, got to chat with them, got to know what's going on, got to get your upgrades going, got to travel around space and position yourself for various missions and be strategic about where you are, because you have time limits to do your missions and thwart the problems and things like that. But that was the other game we checked out, so I might come back to you on that, I might not. What I will say is I was very feeling the 40k vibe over the weekend, so in my evenings, I got a Warhammer Plus subscription, so it was like £5, something like that, because I got recommended something called Tithes. Which I've now seen. So if you're interested in that, let me know. And I'll talk about it on here, because I don't usually talk about stuff I watched on television, essentially. But I watched Tithes, and I'm going to get the name wrong, because Chris shouted at me that I watched Tithes before I watched this, so I've gone back and watched it. Pariah Nexus. Yes, Pariah Nexus is what I watched on Warhammer Plus, which is, I'm sorry to say, Games Workshop, if you ever see this, one of the worst streaming services in existence. Like, I don't know how you're getting away with just how poor that is. It's insane. Like, the fact it doesn't even remember that I logged in on this TV and I have to use a QR code every time. Like, even Disney doesn't do that, right? If you're like, oh, someone might be trying to cheat the system, it's like, even Disney doesn't do this, bro. Like, you've got to get this correct. And your search system is horrendous, absolutely awful. I had to really dig to find if I didn't know the specific name, I would never have found this stuff ever. Like, just awful, just absolutely awful. But if you're interested in that, let me know, and I'll give you my my review of it, because I have some interesting thoughts. Me and Chris were talking about it on Sunday for like an hour and a half, maybe, just shooting the breeze on 20-minute episodes, like talking about it. So it's good fun. But for now, we're on to the FF14 MSQ, and then new project starts. So I'll see you then. Bye, everybody.